Barbara Slavin's a distinguished fellow at Stimson Center. She's joining us from Washington, D.C. Good to have you with us on Al Jazeera. The last time you and I spoke a few days ago, you were pretty pessimistic about the fact that, as far as you were concerned, U.S. military action did seem inevitable. Given what we've seen over the last few hours or so, have you any reason to change your mind?
Well, I'm a little bit more optimistic because of the fact that they are talking about continuing the negotiations with technical talks in Vienna next week. Apparently, has been some clarification of positions, but it's still my understanding that Iran is refusing to concede the right to enrich uranium, and the United States is insisting on no enrichment. So how do they thread that needle? That is still the question. Is there a way that Iran can repurpose the 60% uranium that it has buried under the rubble of the last U.S. and Israeli attacks to use that perhaps for its research reactor that produces medical isotopes? These are technical questions, and perhaps this is a way to resolve the issue. But as your last speaker pointed out, when you bring that much firepower to bear, it is hard to imagine that the Trump administration is going to be able to just remove it all without firing a shot. I'm still concerned that we may see some military action.
Yeah, our correspondent, Tokyo Asadi from Tehran, was reminding us that there are parties on both sides who would rather see an escalation rather than a diplomatic negotiated settlement to this. How much of a hurdle do you think that would be to these talks?
Well, again, everything depends on whether Donald Trump decides that he wants to pull the trigger. This would be his decision. This would be initiating the hostilities. You may remember last summer, the Israelis began the strikes and the United States joined in for the last 3 days. So does Donald Trump want to be the one to initiate strikes when the consequences are difficult to predict? Has been pointed out, I don't think Iran will be so judicious in its response this time as it was last year. He has to weigh this. We're also in an election year, a midterm election here in the United States, and the Trump administration has been criticized for focusing so much on foreign affairs, on foreign adventures in Venezuela, and so on, when most Americans are concerned about inflation, concerned about jobs. And so there's a danger for Donald Trump that if he does begin this and it doesn't go well, it could really hurt the Republicans' chances in midterm elections later this year. So he has a lot to weigh.
And given the fact that both sides do seem to be so far apart still, is it surprising, actually, that the talks are moving forward? And if that is the case, can you take a guess at what areas they may be able to find common ground on, or why particularly they are intent on moving these talks forward?
Well, there are technical fixes for a lot of this. I mentioned the 60% uranium that Iran has. This can be downblended, diluted to a lower concentration, which can be used for research reactors that produce medical isotopes. It's very important that Iran allows the IAEA back in to see what exactly is the status of the program, what was damaged, what can be salvaged, what Iran has done since June. These would be important steps and would increase confidence that Iran is not trying to make nuclear weapons. It's repeatedly insisted it doesn't want to make nuclear weapons. Donald Trump had this strange comment in his State of the Union address where he said, Iran has to say the secret words. It will not make nuclear weapons. Well, it's not secret. They've said it over and over. So there are technical ways to get there, but the U.S. has to be willing to compromise as well as Iran. And I just hope that cooler heads will prevail, because I don't think we need this. This is an unnecessary war. It would be a war of choice, and it's not in American interests, not in the interest of the region.
Please forgive me, because I am about to simplify what is clearly a very complex situation. But in terms of the negotiations itself, and actually in reference to what Osama bin Javed was saying from Geneva, in terms of the way that the Iranians are handling these particular negotiations compared to the way that they handled the JCPOA, In your assessment, how much of this is actually about trying to find a solution to Iran's nuclear program, and how much of it is actually trying to find or create a deal that will allow Donald Trump to say that he did a better job than Barack Obama?
Yeah. Well, obviously, that's very important to Donald Trump to be able to say that. And if Iran, for example, does not enrich any new uranium for a period of time, that would be better than the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which allowed Iran to enrich to 3.67%. As I said, if there is a will, there is a way. But the U.S. also has to accept the fact that Iran will never renounce the right to enrich uranium. It has to be something that both can play as a success. If it's just Donald Trump, I don't think that it will be sellable in Iran. Also, there has to be some sort of sanctions relief or unfreezing of assets to give Iran some concrete benefit for taking these steps. It's not enough just to say, well, we won't bomb you.
It's really interesting to get your expertise in this. Barbara Slavin, we appreciate it as always. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Don't miss out. Get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news and expert insights. Like, share, stay ahead.